She sold one night of her life for $50,000, and she thought that would be the end of it. She thought she would walk out of that hotel room, bury the only mother she had ever known, and disappear back into the gray, exhausted life she came from. She had no idea that one night would chain her to a man's empire, a man's name, and a secret bigger than both of them. She had no idea that the woman crying over a coffin she couldn't afford to bury was, in truth, the missing heiress an entire family had been searching for over 20 years. By the time the truth came out, it wouldn't just shock the people around her. It would shock her most of all. Welcome to @African_mystery_stories. If you're new here, kindly like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. And stay with us, because this story is about to take you somewhere you won't see coming. The rain had not stopped since morning, and it beat against the tin roof of the small funeral parlor on the edge of Millbrook, Ohio, like it was trying to drown out the sound of Amora Lawson's voice. She stood at the counter, her uniform from the hotel still damp under her coat, her hands shaking as she counted out crumpled bills for the third time, as though counting again would somehow make more money appear. "Mr. Dawson, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I just need 2 more days. I'll have the rest by Thursday, I promise you." Frank Dawson, the funeral director, rubbed his temples. He had known Amora since she was a teenager, back when Miss Ruth first took her in off the streets and raised her like her own blood. He didn't want to be the man who denied Ruth Lawson a dignified burial. But business was business, and grief did not pay invoices. "Amora," he said gently, "I've already pushed this 3 times. The cemetery plot, the casket, the embalming, that's $8,000 I'm carrying on my own books. I can't hold it past tomorrow." "She raised me," Amora whispered. "She gave me everything. I can't let her go into the ground like she was nobody." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Frank looked away, unable to hold her gaze. "But I have a business to run." Amora walked out into the rain without an umbrella, and she didn't care. Grief had already soaked through everything else in her life, a little more water wouldn't matter. She had asked her church. She had asked 3 different loan offices. She had asked her manager at the Richmond Grand Hotel for an advance on her paycheck, and been laughed out of the office. She had exactly $640 to her name, and a woman she loved more than anyone in this world lying in a refrigerated drawer, waiting for a burial Amora could not afford. She went to work that night because she had nowhere else to go, and because if she sat still in her empty apartment 1 more hour, she was afraid of what the silence would do to her. The Richmond Grand was the kind of hotel that made people like Amora feel invisible: marble floors, gold light fixtures, guests who never looked cleaning staff in the eye. She had been assigned the executive floor that night, delivering fresh towels and turn-down service to the penthouse suite reserved for the hotel's most important guests. It was the last room on her list, Suite 4400, that changed everything. She knocked twice, announced housekeeping, and let herself in when no one answered. The suite was dim, lit only by the skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows. A man stood by the window with his back to her, a glass of amber liquor untouched in his hand, his shoulders carrying the kind of tension that came from carrying too much responsibility for too long. "I said I didn't want to be disturbed," he said, without turning around. His voice was low, clipped, used to being obeyed. "I'm sorry, sir. I just need to replace the towels," and he turned then, and Amora felt the air leave her lungs. She recognized him instantly, the way most of Millbrook did. Damian Cole, CEO of Crestline Holdings. The man whose face was on the cover of every regional business magazine, whose name alone could make grown executives stammer. He was younger than his reputation suggested, maybe 34, with a jaw carved from stone and eyes that looked like they had never once needed anyone's help. "Leave them on the chair," he said, dismissing her without another glance. Amora set the towels down with hands that would not stop trembling. It wasn't fear of him exactly. It was exhaustion, grief, and something in his cold composure that made her own composure finally crack. She turned to leave, but a small, broken sound escaped her throat before she could stop it, and she pressed her palm against her mouth too late. Damian's eyes sharpened. Are you crying? No, sir. I'm sorry. I'll go. Stop. The single word landed like a command, and her feet obeyed before her mind caught up. He studied her, the exhaustion carved into her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the uniform that had clearly been worn for more than one shift in a row. What's wrong with you? It's nothing you need to concern yourself with, sir. I didn't ask because I was concerned, he said flatly. I asked because I don't like unresolved variables in my presence. Talk. There was something almost cruel in the bluntness of it, and yet Amora found herself talking anyway, maybe because she had no one left to tell, maybe because grief needed somewhere to go. She told him about Miss Ruth. About the $8,000. About Frank Dawson's ultimatum. About a woman who deserved better than a pauper's grave after giving Amora the only real love she had ever known. Damian listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, swirling the liquor in his glass. I'll cover it, he said finally. All of it. The funeral, the plot, whatever else you need. Amora blinked at him, certain she had misheard. Sir, I can't accept that. I don't even know you. You don't have to know me. You just have to say yes. He set the glass down and walked toward her, slow, deliberate, the way a predator moves when it already knows the outcome of the hunt. But nothing in this. Life is free. Miss, what's your name? Amora. Amora Lawson. Miss Lawson. Nothing is free. I'll pay for the funeral. In full, tonight, before you leave this hotel. In exchange, you stay here with me. Tonight. That's the price. The words hit her like a slap. Her face burned with humiliation, and for a moment she couldn't speak at all. You're asking me to. I'm not asking anything you haven't already. Understood, he said, cutting her off, his voice utterly without apology. I'm a businessman. I deal in transactions. This is a transaction. Take it or leave it. Miss Lawson. I have very little patience for moral speeches tonight. She stood there with her heart breaking in two directions at once, one half screaming at her to walk out and keep whatever dignity she had left, the other half seeing Miss Ruth's face, hearing her laugh. Remembering every sacrifice that woman had made. For a child that wasn't even her own blood. Amora thought of the freezer drawer at Dawson's funeral. Home. She thought of Frank's voice telling her he could only wait one more day. Okay, she whispered, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. Okay. I'll stay. Damian didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't do anything to acknowledge that he had just extracted the most painful decision of her life out of her. He simply pulled out his phone, transferred $50,000 to an account number she gave him with shaking fingers, and told her to sit down and wait. That night blurred into something Amora would spend years trying not to remember in detail, the coldness of him, the transactional silence, the way he never once looked at her like she was a person rather than a decision he had already made. When morning came, gray light creeping over the city skyline, she dressed quickly, ready to disappear from his life forever. Wait. His voice stopped her at the door. He was already dressed in a sharp suit, sitting at the desk with his laptop open, as though nothing unusual had happened at all. The money's already been sent to the funeral home. Dawson's, correct? Yes, she said quietly. Thank you. I don't need your gratitude. He didn't look up from his screen. I need an assistant in my administrative pool, entry level. You'll start Monday. HR will send the paperwork to your email. Why would you do that? Amora asked, stunned. For the first time, Damien looked at her properly, and something flickered behind his eyes that she couldn't name. Because you didn't beg. Everyone begs. You just told the truth. He returned his attention to his laptop. Don't be late Monday. Amora left that hotel suite feeling like she had traded away a piece of her soul, but she had buried Miss Ruth with dignity, in a plot with fresh flowers and a proper headstone, and for that, she told herself, she would carry the shame quietly and never look back. She had no idea Monday was only the beginning. Crestline Holdings occupied 18 floors of glass. First hour there, Amora understood she had walked into a battlefield. Word had already spread, she never learned exactly how, but by lunchtime on her first day, every eye in the administrative pool watched her with the same code, assessing hostility. That's her, she overheard one woman whisper near the break room. The one who spent the night with Cole at the Ridgemont. Cheap way to get a job, another voice sneered. Amora kept her head down and her mouth shut, focusing on the stack of filing she'd been assigned, telling herself that hard work would eventually silence the whispers. It didn't. Vanessa Briggs, Director of Client Relations, made it her personal mission to ensure Amora's life at Crestline was miserable. Vanessa was polished, ruthless, and had spent 6 years climbing toward Damien's inner circle, only to watch a hotel cleaner walk in and receive a position without so much as an interview. You do understand, Vanessa said one afternoon, cornering Amora by the copy machine, that everyone here knows exactly how you got this job. I earned an interview like anyone else, Amora lied, refusing to look away. Vanessa's laugh was sharp and humorless. Sweetheart, there's no version of reality where a hotel maid gets hired into Crestline's admin pool without spreading her legs for the boss. Save the performance for someone who believes it. Clara Benson, Vanessa's closest ally in the office and just as calculating, made sure Amora's workload doubled overnight, reports due impossibly early, meetings she wasn't told about until they were already over, files mysteriously misplaced right before quarterly audits. Amora stayed 3 hours late nearly every evening just to keep pace, redoing work that had been deliberately sabotaged, swallowing her exhaustion because she had nowhere else to go and a new grief to outrun. Damien, for his part, treated her like a stranger. He passed her in the hallway without a flicker of recognition. He addressed her in meetings with the same clipped formality he used with everyone else. If anything, he seemed to go out of his way to prove there was nothing between them, and some nights Amora went home wondering if she had imagined the whole encounter, if the man from the Ridgemont Grand had been a fever dream born of grief and desperation. But she noticed things, small things, that told a different story. The week Vanessa tried to have her fired over a fabricated compliance violation, the termination mysteriously never made it past HR. The month Clara assigned her an impossible project timeline clearly designed to end in failure, an anonymous internal memo extended the deadline by 2 weeks, citing resource reallocation. Amora never saw Damien intervene directly. She only saw the aftermath, quiet, deliberate, and utterly deniable. One evening, working late again to redo a presentation Clara had corrupted at the last minute, Amora found herself alone on the executive floor when Damien's office door opened. "You're still here," he said, more observation than question. Clara needed the Siemens account deck redone by morning, Amora said, too tired to filter her frustration. Again. Damien studied her for a long moment. "You could report the sabotage." "To who?" "Everyone already believes I only have this job because of what happened between us. If I complain, it just confirms what they already think, that I can't do the work myself." Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like respect, though he buried it quickly beneath his usual detachment. "Finish the deck. Then go home. You're no use to this company." Exhausted. It was the closest thing to kindness he had shown her since that morning at the hotel, and Amora hated how much it meant to her. Weeks passed. The hostility never fully disappeared, but Amora refused to break under it. She stayed later than anyone, learned faster than anyone, and slowly a handful of colleagues began to see past the rumors to the woman who never missed a deadline no matter how sabotaged. It should have been enough. It should have been the beginning of something better. Then Amora missed her period, and everything collapsed again. She sat in her bathroom for 20 minutes staring at 2 pink lines, her mind refusing to process what her body already knew. She was pregnant. And the timeline left no room for doubt about whose child it was. She told Damien the next evening, cornering him after hours when the office had emptied out, her voice steady even as her hands trembled at her sides. "I'm pregnant," she said. "It's yours. I need you to know before this goes any further." Damien's face went rigid, and for the first time since she had met him, Amora watched something in him lose its composure entirely. "That's not possible." "I'm telling you it is." "It's not possible," he repeated, his voice rising, "because I gave you pills that night. Contraception. I don't leave things to chance, Miss Lawson, not ever. There is no version of this where you get pregnant." Amora stared at him, confusion and fury tangling together in her chest. "What pills? You never gave me anything." "The white tablets on the nightstand. I told you to take them before you left." She remembered them now, small, unmarked, and she had assumed, in her exhaustion and shame that morning, that they were simple aspirin, something to dull the headache pounding behind her eyes. She had swallowed them without a second thought. "I don't know what those were," she said slowly, "but they weren't contraception. Or they didn't work. Either way, I'm pregnant, and it's yours, whether you believe me or not." "I don't believe you," Damien said coldly. "I think you saw an opportunity, and you're taking it." The accusation cut deeper than any insult Vanessa or Clara had ever thrown at her. Amora felt something in her chest crackling in half. "You think I want this? You think I want to be pregnant by a man who looks at me like I'm a mistake he's trying to erase? I came to you because you deserve to know, not because I wanted anything from you." She walked out before he could see her cry, and she did not stop crying for 3 days straight. It was Dr. Adrian Wells, the company's on-site physician, who finally uncovered the truth. Amora had gone to him for her first prenatal visit, still reeling, still unsure what to do about a pregnancy that felt like both a miracle and a curse. Almost as an afterthought, she mentioned the pills Damien claimed to have given her that night. "Do you still have any of them?" Dr. Wells asked. "One, maybe. I kept it out of habit, I don't know why." She brought it in the next day. Dr. Wells ran a quick analysis and called her back into his office with a strange, careful expression. "Amora, these aren't contraceptives. These are basic multivitamins. Whoever gave you this either made a serious mistake, or never intended for them to prevent anything at all." The revelation didn't just confuse Amora. It shattered something in her that she hadn't realized was still holding together. Someone had made a devastating error, or worse, someone had deliberately deceived Damien into believing he was protected when he wasn't. Either way, the child growing inside her was real, undeniable, and utterly unplanned by anyone in that hotel room. She confronted Damien with the lab results, sliding the paper across his desk without a word. He read it twice, his jaw tightening with each line. "Where did you get these pills?" Amora asked quietly. "My assistant procures things for me. Standard procedure." Damien's voice had lost its earlier fire, replaced now with something colder and more dangerous, the sound of a man realizing he had been played by someone close to him. "I need to find out who switched them." "That doesn't change what's happening to me right now," Amora said. "I'm carrying a child neither of us planned, and I don't even know if you're capable of caring about that fact beyond how it embarrasses you." Damien said nothing, and his silence told her everything she needed to know. She left his office that day seriously considering ending the pregnancy, not because she didn't want the child, but because she couldn't imagine raising it in a world this cold, tethered to a man who saw fatherhood as a corporate liability. She might have gone through with it, had fate not intervened in the cruelest possible way. In the weeks following the confrontation, Amora had begun noticing irregularities in the Siemens account files Clara had originally sabotaged, numbers that didn't reconcile, vendor payments routed to accounts that didn't match any registered supplier, invoices duplicated and paid twice within the same fiscal quarter. She wasn't looking for anything. She had simply been doing her job with the thoroughness that had become her only defense against the office's hostility, and the pattern emerged almost by accident. She brought her concerns to a junior analyst in accounting, careful not to name names, only asking quiet questions about vendor verification processes. It was enough. Word travels fast in a building full of people looking for reasons to destroy each other, and within 2 days, Vanessa and Clara knew that Amora had stumbled onto the financial sabotage they had been running for over a year, skimming company funds through shell vendors and falsified contracts. They came for her on a Thursday evening, after most of the floor had emptied out. Vanessa found her alone in the records archive on the building's lowest level, a windowless room used for cold storage of sensitive documents, kept at near-freezing temperatures to preserve older paper files. "You should have minded your business," Vanessa said, her voice eerily calm as Clara appeared behind her, blocking the only exit. "I don't know what you're talking about," Amora said, backing away instinctively. "Don't insult us," Clara snapped. "We know you've been asking questions in accounting. We know exactly what you found." What happened next unfolded so fast that Amora barely had time to process it before the heavy steel door slammed shut, the automatic lock clicking into place, and the room's temperature control system, the very system meant to preserve documents, not people, dropped the space into a bitter, punishing cold. She screamed until her voice gave out. She pounded on the door until her hands bruised. And then, as the hours passed and the cold sank deeper into her bones, deeper than she had ever felt cold before, she sank to the floor and wrapped her arms around herself, praying for the baby she hadn't even decided if she wanted, praying that someone, anyone, would notice she was gone before it was too late. Damien noticed at 8:40 that evening. He had stopped by the administrative floor on his way out, an unusual detour he couldn't quite explain to himself even later, and found her desk empty, her coat still on the back of her chair, her purse still tucked beneath her desk. Something about the stillness of it unsettled him in a way he didn't have words for. He checked her office badge logs. Last entry, the records archive, 6:02 p.m. No exit recorded since. He was in the elevator within 90 seconds, his heart hammering with a fear he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, and by the time security pried the archive door open using an override code, Amora was barely conscious, her lips blue, her body shaking so violently it looked like convulsions. "Amora!" Damien's voice cracked as he dropped to his knees beside her, pulling her into his arms, stripping off his own suit jacket to wrap around her freezing frame. "Stay with me. Stay with me, do you hear me?" She didn't answer. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused, and for one terrifying moment, Damien Cole, a man who had built an empire on never once losing control, felt the entire world tilt sideways beneath him. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Amora was rushed to the hospital, her core temperature dangerously low, her pulse weak, the pregnancy itself in immediate jeopardy. Damien did not leave her side, not for the ambulance ride, not for the hours in the emergency room, not for the moment doctors confirmed that both Amora and the baby had survived, though barely. Security footage from the archive corridor told the rest of the story without a single word needed from Amora herself. Vanessa Briggs and Clara Benson were both terminated within 24 hours and handed over to local police on charges of attempted assault, embezzlement, and financial fraud once the accounting irregularities were fully traced back to accounts under their control. Amora woke the next morning in a hospital bed, warm blankets piled around her, and amphor drip in her arm, and Damien Cole asleep in the chair beside her bed, his tie loosened, his usually immaculate hair disheveled, dark circles carved beneath his eyes like he hadn't slept properly in days. "You stayed," she whispered, and he startled awake instantly. "Of course I stayed." His voice was rough, stripped of its usual cold precision. "Amora, I am so sorry. I should have believed you from the beginning. I should have protected you the moment those women started targeting you. Instead I stood by and let my own pride convince me you were lying about something that mattered more than my ego." Amora studied him for a long moment, too exhausted to summon the anger she knew she was entitled to. "The baby. Stable. The doctors say you both are stable." He reached for her hand, hesitated, then took it anyway, as if giving himself permission for the first time. "I nearly lost you tonight, and I realized I have spent months treating the most important thing that's ever happened to me like an inconvenience. That's going to change, Amora. I swear it." She wanted to believe him. Some tired, wounded part of her wanted so badly to believe him. But trust, once broken as thoroughly as his had broken hers, does not rebuild itself in a single hospital room confession, however sincere it sounds in the moment. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said quietly. "Not yet." "I'm not asking you to," Damien answered. "I'm asking you to let me earn it." If Damien thought the crisis in the storage room had settled things, he was wrong. Word of what happened reached his grandfather, Harold Cole, within days, not the full truth, but enough of it, filtered through Crestline's board members eager to protect their own reputations. Harold arrived at Crestline's headquarters on a Tuesday morning like a storm rolling in off the coast, summoning Damien to his private office on the top floor with a single task phone call. An employee. Pregnant. Nearly killed in a corporate sabotage scandal that's now sitting on the desk of two separate journalists. Harold's voice was ice, decades of controlled fury compressed into every syllable. "Do you have any conception of what this does to the co-name, Damien?" "Her name is Amara," Damien said evenly, though his jaw was tight. "And she nearly died because two of our own executives tried to silence her. That should concern you more than the headlines. It concerns me that my grandson has fathered a child out of wedlock with a member of his own staff, under circumstances that any competent journalist could spin into a scandal that cost this family everything we've built over 3 generations. Harold set his glass down with a sharp click against his desk. "There is one solution that protects both this family's reputation and that woman's future. You marry her." Damien blinked, certain he had misheard. "Marry her. A contract marriage. 2 years. Public appearances only, no genuine expectations of affection or intimacy between you. At the end of 2 years, she receives $2 million and a clean, quiet exit, and this family's name remains untarnished by scandal. The child is legitimized. The optics are managed. Everyone walks away satisfied." Harold Stone made clear this was not a request. "You will present this to her today." Damien wanted to refuse on principle alone, some part of him rebelling against reducing Amora to another line item in his grandfather's damage control ledger. But he also understood, with a clarity that unsettled him, that whatever Harold's motives, the arrangement did offer Amora and their child a level of protection and stability that nothing else currently could. He presented the contract to Amora that evening in his office, sliding the document across the desk exactly as coldly as he had once slid across a business proposal to any other executive, though something in his eyes betrayed how little he actually wanted to treat this the same way. "My grandfather has proposed this," he said. "A 2-year marriage. Public appearances only. No emotional obligations on either side. At the end of it, you receive $2 million and full freedom to walk away, no strings attached, and our child grows up with a stable, legitimized name behind them." Amora read through the document twice, her stomach twisting with every clinical clause: no shared bedroom required, no public displays of affection expected, strict confidentiality regarding the arrangement's true nature, financial settlement contingent on completing the full 2-year term. "This is insulting," she said finally. "I know," Damian admitted. I hate it as much as you do. But it protects our child, Amora. Whatever else is true about my family's obsession with appearances, the security it offers you both is real. She thought of the tiny life growing inside her, of the $2 million that could build an entirely different future for a child who deserved better than the chaos surrounding its conception, of a name, the co-name, that would shield her baby from whispers and cruelty the way her own name never could. I'll sign it, she said, for the baby. Not for you. I understand, Damian said quietly, and something in his voice suggested the distinction cost him more than he was willing to admit. Living together, Amora quickly discovered, was its own particular kind of torment. Damian's penthouse was enormous, cold, and impersonal, decorated by an interior designer who had clearly never met the man living inside it. For the first few weeks, they moved around each other like strangers sharing a hotel, exchanging polite, clipped conversation over breakfast, retreating to opposite ends of the apartment the moment any conversation risks becoming personal. You don't have to eat breakfast standing at the counter, Amora said one morning, watching him gulp black coffee while scrolling through emails on his phone. There's a table right there. Habit, Damian said, not looking up. A lonely habit. That earned her a sharp glance, the first real flicker of surprise she had drawn from him in weeks. You think you know me well enough to diagnose loneliness. I think a man who eats standing up in a $15 million penthouse, alone, every single morning, doesn't need a psychology degree to understand what that says about his life. Amora poured herself orange juice, unbothered by his obvious discomfort. But it's not my business. Eat however you like. He didn't respond, but the next morning, she found him sitting at the table when she came downstairs, 2 cups of coffee already poured, one of them decaffeinated, exactly the way her doctor had recommended for the pregnancy. He said nothing about it. He didn't need to. Small moments accumulated like that over the following weeks, Damian learning her cravings before she voiced them, adjusting his schedule around her prenatal appointments without being asked, standing quietly beside her at ultrasounds with an expression of wonder he clearly hadn't expected to feel and didn't know how to hide. Amora found herself, against every instinct of self-preservation, softening toward him in small, careful increments. Would you like to know what we're having? The ultrasound technician asked during one appointment, and Amora looked to Damian before answering, an instinct that surprised her even as it happened. Only if you want to, she said. Damian's throat worked visibly. I want to know. The technician smiled. You're having twins. A boy and a girl. Amora watched Damian's carefully constructed composure crack entirely for the first time since she'd met him, his eyes glassy, his hand finding hers on the exam table without either of them consciously deciding to reach for the other. Twins, he repeated, as though testing the word's weight. I'm going to be a father to twins. You are, Amora said softly, and for the first time since that terrible night at the Richmond Grand, she saw something in his face that looked almost like joy, unguarded and entirely real. It was around this same time that strange, small details began surfacing about Amora's own childhood, fragments that had always existed at the edges of her memory but never quite added up to a coherent picture. Miss Ruth had always told her a simple story, that Amora's birth mother had died young, that Ruth had taken her in as an infant out of Christian charity, that there was no family left to speak of. But Amora had found, tucked among Ruth's belongings after her death, a small manila envelope containing a single photograph of an infant with an unmistakable crescent-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder blade, Amora's own birthmark, alongside a torn newspaper clipping too faded to read clearly, and a name scrawled on the back in Ruth's handwriting, Elena. Amora had tucked the envelope away, grief-stricken and too overwhelmed at the time to make sense of it, but now, months later, settled into an uneasy peace inside Damian's penthouse, the questions began gnawing at her in the quiet hours before sleep. Who is Elena? She asked Damian one evening, showing him the photograph and clipping over dinner. He studied the image carefully, his brow furrowing. You should ask someone who might actually know. A private investigator, perhaps. I can arrange one, if you'd like. You'd do that. Amora, whatever else stands unresolved between us, you deserve to know where you came from. Everyone does. He said it simply, without theatrics, and something in the sincerity of it moved her more than any grand gesture could have. The investigators' findings arrived 3 weeks later, and they detonated Amora's entire understanding of her own existence. An elderly woman named Colleen Hartwell had recognized Amora at a charity gala Crestline hosted for a local children's hospital, recognized not Amora's face, exactly, but the same crescent-shaped birthmark visible above the neckline of her gown as she leaned down to greet a young patient. Colleen had gone pale, gripping the arm of the nearest attendant, insisting through tears that she needed to speak with Amora privately. That birthmark, Colleen said, her voice trembling as she sat across from Amora in a private lounge of the main ballroom. I would know it anywhere. My granddaughter had that exact same mark. Elena. She disappeared 23 years ago, when she was barely 2 years old. Taken during a custody dispute that turned violent, and never recovered despite years of searching. My daughter never stopped looking for her, not until the day she herself passed away, still hoping. Amora's hands had gone cold around her champagne glass. That can't be. My mother raised me. Miss Ruth. She would have told me if, Ruth Lawson, Colleen said, and something in her face shifted from grief into something more complicated. I remember that name from the investigation files. She was questioned once, years ago, in connection with a woman who'd fled the state with a child matching Elena's description. Nothing was ever proven. The case went cold. The DNA test, arranged discreetly through Dr. Adrian Wells and cross-referenced against genetic samples the Hartwell family had kept on file for over 2 decades, confirmed what the birthmark and Colleen's tearful recognition had already suggested. Amora Lawson, hotel cleaner turned Crestline employee turned reluctant contract bride, was in fact Elena Hartwell, heir to one of the region's oldest and most respected families, missing for over 20 years and long presumed impossible to find. The revelation detonated through every corner of Amora's life simultaneously. Reporters who had been circling the Cole family scandal for months suddenly found an entirely different, far more sensational story: the missing Hartwell heiress, discovered alive, pregnant with the twins of a billionaire CEO, in a story so improbable it read like fiction even to the journalists writing it. Amora sat in stunned silence for days, trying to reconcile the life she had always believed was hers with the one that had apparently been stolen from her before she was old enough to remember any of it. She grieved Miss Ruth all over again, this time with the complicated ache of not knowing whether the woman who raised her had been a savior or something far more troubling, and she grieved, too, for the family she had never known she'd lost, grandparents, cousins, an entire lineage that had spent 2 decades searching for a little girl who had been right there in Millbrook the entire time, cleaning hotel rooms and burying the only mother she'd ever known. The Hartwell family welcomed her with a tenderness that nearly broke her grandmother Colleen weeping openly the first time she held Amora's hands, distant cousins traveling from 3 states away simply to meet her, an outpouring of love so immediate and unconditional that it stood in stark contrast to everything Amora had endured over the preceding months at Crestline. Damien watched all of it unfold with the expression Amora had never seen on him before, something between awe and shame, as though he were only now understanding the full weight of what he had done to her, and to whom. "You never once chased anything," he said quietly one evening, finding her on the penthouse balcony, staring out at the city lights. "Not my money, not my name, not any advantage this arrangement could have offered you. And this entire time, you were born into more wealth and legacy than my family will ever have, and you never even knew it." "It doesn't change anything, Damien," Amora said. "I'm still the same person who scrubbed toilets and delivered towels to your suite that night. Money doesn't rewrite who I've always been." "No," Damien agreed, moving closer, his voice raw in a way she'd rarely heard from him. "But it does force me to confront exactly what I did to you. I took your desperation and I turned it into leverage. I treated the woman carrying my children like a transaction, an inconvenience, a liability to manage. And this whole time you had every right to walk away from me and land in a life 100 times better than anything Crestline could offer, and you stayed anyway, for the sake of our children. I don't deserve that kind of grace, Amora. I know that now. Amora turned to face him fully, exhaustion and grief and something dangerously close to forgiveness tangled together in her chest. What are you asking me, Damien? I'm asking for a chance, he said, not because of a contract, and not because my grandfather is worried about the family name. I'm asking because somewhere over these past few months, I stopped seeing you as an obligation and started seeing you as the only person who's ever made me want to be a better man than the one I've always been. I love you, Amora. I don't expect you to believe that after everything, but it's true, and I needed you to hear it before you decide what happens next. Before you go, if this story is hitting different, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling me what you think Amora should do next. We're almost at the ending, and trust me, you do not want to miss it. Amora didn't answer him that night. She needed time to grieve the mother who had raised her under circumstances she still didn't fully understand, time to grow into the unfamiliar identity of Elena Hartwell, time to decide whether the man standing in front of her, however sincere his apology sounded, deserved the kind of trust he was asking her to extend. The following weeks were quieter than anything Amora had experienced since that rainy night outside Frank Dawson's funeral parlor. She split her time between the Hartwell estate, learning the contours of a family history she was only beginning to understand, and the penthouse she still technically shared with Damien, their contract marriage now hollowed out of all its original purpose, existing in a strange limbo neither of them acknowledged directly. Harold Cole, upon learning that his grandson's contract bride was in fact heir to the Hartwell fortune, underwent a transformation so swift and shameless that even Damien found it difficult to watch without disgust. This changes everything, Harold said during a hastily arranged family dinner, practically glowing with the news. The Hartwell name alongside Cole, do you understand the doors this opens, Damien? This isn't a scandal to manage anymore. This is the greatest alliance this family has made in 3 generations. Grandfather, Damien said, his voice tight with barely restrained anger, Amora isn't a merger. She's not an alliance. She's a woman I nearly destroyed through my own arrogance, and if she decides she wants nothing more to do with either of us, that will be entirely deserved. Don't be dramatic, Harold said, waving off the concern. The woman clearly cares for you, or she wouldn't still be living under your roof. She's still living under my roof because she's carrying my children and because leaving would mean uprooting an already complicated situation, Damien said. Not because of some fairy tale you've constructed in your head. Harold's confidence, however grating, wasn't entirely wrong, though Damien would have never admitted it aloud. Amora had begun returning to the penthouse each evening not out of contractual obligation, but because something in the quiet domesticity they'd built together, decaffeinated coffee waiting each morning, Damien's hand steady against the small of her back during appointments, late-night conversations about names for the twins that stretched long past midnight, had become something she genuinely wanted, however cautiously. Elena or Amora, Damien asked one night, both of them lying awake in the dark, careful distance maintained between them out of habit more than desire. Which one do you want to be? I don't know yet, Amora admitted. Elena is a stranger to me. Amora is who Miss Ruth raised, whatever her reasons were for taking me. I think, for now, I'm still figuring out how to be both. You don't have to figure it out alone, Damien said quietly. I know, she said, and for the first time in months, she reached for his hand in the dark, and he held it like something precious, something he had no intention of ever letting go of again. The final piece of the puzzle arrived not through investigation, but through a confession. Miss Ruth's estranged sister, tracked down by the Hartwell family's private investigators, finally broke her silence, revealing the truth that had died with Ruth herself. Years earlier, Ruth had worked as a private caregiver for the Hartwell family, employed briefly during a period when a bitter custody battle had erupted between Elena's parents following her mother's untimely death. Fearing that Elena would be handed over to a father credibly accused of abuse, accusations the family's wealth and influence had successfully buried in court, Ruth had made a desperate, illegal decision to disappear with the toddler, believing wholeheartedly she was protecting the child from a monster the justice system refused to punish. She fled to Millbrook, changed her own name and Elena's, and raised the girl as her own daughter, carrying the secret and the guilt of it for over 2 decades, never once telling Amora the truth for fear of destroying the only stability the child had ever known. The revelation didn't erase the complicated grief Amora carried, but it did soften it into something she could finally hold with something like understanding. Miss Ruth hadn't stolen her out of cruelty. She had stolen her out of love, however misguided, however illegal, and in doing so had given Amora a childhood far safer than the one she might have otherwise endured. "She saved me," Amora said through tears, sitting with Colleen Hartwell in the sunlit garden of the family estate. "In her own broken way, she saved me from a man who should never have had custody of anyone." "I believe that," Colleen said gently, squeezing her hand. "And I'll never be able to fully forgive the years we lost, but I can be grateful you're here now, safe, and about to bring 2 more Hartwells into this world." With the truth finally settled, Amora made her decision. She found Damien in his office late one evening, the contract marriage documents spread across his desk where he had apparently been reviewing them, perhaps preparing the paperwork for the eventual dissolution neither of them had yet discussed openly. "I've made a decision," Amora said, and Damien looked up, bracing visibly for whatever she was about to say. Before she could continue, he stood, gathered the entire contract in both hands, and without hesitation, tore it cleanly in half in front of her. "Whatever you decide," he said, his voice thick with emotion he no longer bothered hiding, "it won't be because of this contract, and it won't be because of my grandfather's schemes, or the Hartwell fortune, or any obligation manufactured by circumstance. If you stay, Amora, I need it to be because you actually want to build something real with me. And if you walk away, I'll accept that too, because God knows I've given you every reason to. But I'm done pretending this is a transaction. I love you. I love the family we are building. And I am asking you, without any contract standing between us, to give me a chance to prove I can be the man you and our children deserve." Amora looked at the torn documents scattered across the desk, then at the man standing in front of her, stripped for the first time of every defense he'd ever hidden behind, and she felt something inside her finally settle. "I already decided," she said softly. "Before you tore that contract, actually. I decided I'm staying, Damien. Not because of the babies, not because of the money, not because my grandfather thinks it's the story angle of a lifetime. I'm staying because somewhere between the storage room and the ultrasounds and the mornings you started making my coffee without being asked, I fell in love with you too. And I think, for the first time in your life, you're actually letting yourself be loved back." Damien crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since that cold, transactional night at the Ridgemont Grand, the embrace held nothing but tenderness. Amora Cole, she chose to keep both names, Elena Hartwell Cole, trading her rediscovered heritage together with the identity Miss Ruth had given her, gave birth to healthy twins on a bright spring morning 3 months later, a boy they named after Damien's late father and a girl they named Ruth, in honor of the imperfect, desperate love that had saved her life even if it had also complicated it beyond recognition. Both families gathered in the hospital room that day, an unlikely alliance of Hartwell wealth and Cole ambition, all of it dissolved into something simpler and more important, grandparents fighting gently over who got to hold the babies first, Harold Cole crying openly for what Damien swore was the first time in his adult life, Colleen Hartwell whispering promises to grandchildren she had never expected to meet. Months later, at Miss Ruth's graveside, the same cemetery where Amora had once begged Frank Dawson for 2 more days, the same plot she had nearly lost the ability to properly bury her mother in, Damien stood beside her, one twin cradled in each of their arms, as Amora placed fresh flowers against the headstone. "Thank you," Amora whispered to the grave, "for saving me, even though I know now it wasn't simple, and it wasn't easy, and it wasn't entirely right. You loved me the only way you knew how, And it brought me here, to this family, to these babies, to a man who finally sees me the way I always deserve to be seen. I hope, wherever you are, you know that it worked out. I hope you know I forgive you." Damien reached for her free hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and together they turned away from the grave and walked toward the car, toward the family waiting for them, toward a future built not on contracts or obligations or desperate transactions in hotel suites, but on the fragile, hard-won foundation of honesty, forgiveness, and love freely given. If this story moved you, don't scroll away just yet. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments which part hit you the hardest. Was it the night at the hotel, the freezing storage room, or the moment Damien tore up that contract? Tell us below. And stay tuned, because our next story might just be even more unforgettable than this one.